The Spindrift Knight of Mondstadt's aristocracy, Eula, is returning to Genshin Impact. Throughout the months, her role beyond her contentious release is still considered fairly niche. As one of the few units that truly embodies a hyper-offensive unit, Eula has a couple of quirks that stop her from breaking out into the forefront of the meta. If you are on the fence about whether or not you should pull for Eula, we will explain if she is worth your Primo Gems. Before you wish. Before You Wish is a video series dedicated to noting the good, bad, and ugly of characters in Genshin Impact. Many aspects of a unit are not apparent to the average Genshin player, even after playing them in the trials, due to the inaccurate testing environment that can make characters seem better than they truly are. Explicitly noting the pros and cons of these characters in full detail should inform you about how to push them to their highest potential and what it costs to do so. As always, if you enjoy a character for reasons like their voice actor, aesthetic, or personality, these videos are by no means meant to stop you from spending your Primo Gems on them. Instead, they should prepare you for the type of problems that you'll need to solve or work around to meet your gameplay expectations. Let us begin. Eula is not complicated in the sense that her kit is hard to explain, unlike Klee or Hu Tao. Eula's issues stem from the same aspect of her kit that makes her so satisfying to play, her Elemental Burst, Glacial Illumination. Eula's Elemental Burst is everything. It contributes to around 50% of her total damage output per rotation, and the pop for huge amounts of damage is why Eula enjoyers can sing her praises. Her Elemental Skill and Grimheart stacks are used to allow her Elemental Burst to deal more damage. Her Elemental Burst gives you a window of 7 seconds after her swing to accumulate Lightfall Sword stacks through damaging enemies with her normal attacks and Elemental Skill. Once these 7 seconds are over, Eula detonates the Lightfall Sword, dealing AoE physical damage that is dependent on the number of stacks you gained after initial cast. However, Eula's Frightening Burst comes with appropriate costs and risks to balance. Eula is completely backloaded in terms of damage, and she requires immense team support to maintain energy and health levels. Eula's Elemental Burst being backloaded means that a major part of her damage profile will always occur at the end of her rotation. Enemies that can dash, jump, burrow, have shields, or can simply run away can dodge her Elemental Burst damage. As much as Eula would love to have the freedom to navigate through different combo weaves and to dodge enemy attacks, she simply does not have the time to waste. The remedy for this isn't as simple as just chasing after her enemies, since her 7-second timer will expire before you can accumulate many Lightfall Sword stacks. The cost for missing her Elemental Burst cannot be understated. Eula's Elemental Burst contributes a massive portion of her damage output and costs a whopping 80 energy. Since her Elemental Burst calculates damage at the end of her burst duration with no snapshotting mechanic, units that provide bonuses for less than 10 seconds have very low synergy with Eula. Furthermore, Eula being fully physical damage means that Superconduct is a great buff that requires very little of the player to maintain, but comes at the cost of restricting her ceiling because she does not work with many other buffers. Eula also requires team that can mitigate the cost of her Elemental Burst by providing ample energy and works well with units that deal electro damage to provide Superconduct's powerful minus 40% physical resistance debuff. Her energy issues are especially exacerbated by the fact that she cannot catch energy during her Elemental Burst animation and is unable to swap to generate energy during her burst without losing damage, since the Lightfall Sword detonates instantly upon switching characters. With her team composition slots being sparse, Eula's teams are often left with very little room to spare, and I desire to run other 5-star units like Raiden Shogun or Zhongli. Her team compositions will always need units that provide energy, electro for superconduct, and survivability. Not many units can condense these roles well for Eula, so it is difficult to build a Eula composition that excels in a majority of content. The solutions we found for Eula's team compositions can be found in the Eula guide on our website. A common misconception that stems from her powerful elemental burst stick is her DPS. Eula's power is directly found in her investment, requiring immense amounts of grit and attack percent to excel, and players are often deceived by the large numbers that explode at the end of her burst. Eula is a hyper carry and demands just as much from her artifacts. Optimizing her energy recharge demands, depending on your team, are necessary in order to use her elemental burst on reasonable times, so it's quite difficult to have versatility between different supports without losing damage. As for her equipment, it's fairly straightforward. The Song of Broken Pines exceeds her other options, such as Wolf's Gravestone or even the Unforged. For her 4-star options, players can reasonably enjoy the Serpent Spine or Luxurious Sea Lord. In terms of artifacts, try to use the 4-piece Pale Flame set, but don't sacrifice her substats for it. Mixing and matching costs damage, but the 2-piece effects of Bloodstained Chivalry, Gladiator's Finale, Shimenawa's Reminiscence, and Emblem of Severed Fate can work. Eula's constellations are quite scattered in terms of damage returns, with large gains in constellations 1, 3, and 6. To start, Eula's first constellation provides good damage that requires no changes at all to her standard rotation, and can be considered a straight damage steroid. Her second constellation is extremely niche, since casting her elemental skill comes at the cost of her competitive damage by just normal attacking during her burst. Outside of her burst, however, this skill provides an increase in energy generation since her held elemental skill provides an extra energy particle. Eula's third constellation is extremely powerful, with an additional 3 talent levels into a component of her kit that deals half her damage profile. It is a straight damage increase. Eula's fourth constellation is not that great, since damage percent gain on Lightfall swords are additive with her physical damage bonuses from her artifacts and weapons. Additionally, it has a condition that is not always met when her Lightfall sword expires, making its practicality low. Eula's fifth constellation is quite useless to aim for. It is a minor bump in your total damage output, and the resistance shred gained caps out at talent level 10. Furthermore, the Lightfall sword that can be detonated from her Grimheart stacks scales with her elemental burst, not her elemental skill. Eula's sixth constellation is undeniably one of the most powerful constellations in the game. Her elemental burst caps out at 30 stacks, with C6 being the only way to achieve it. From a standard rotation, Eula goes from 14 stacks to gaining 25 to 26 stacks on average. So, when should you roll for Eula? Players should roll for Eula if they want a physical damage carry and love to see huge numbers at the end of their rotation. In terms of her position, she is solidly in the middle of the pack of the Genshin roster, and works well when she's properly outfitted for it. The simplicity of using her strong normal attacks is always a strong appeal. Now, when shouldn't you roll for Eula? It is quite difficult to recommend rolling Eula for most players. She demands a lot of time and effort in terms of her optimal combos and artifacts. She will not be Ganyu, Xiao, Hu Tao, Bennett, or Xiangling, who just work. Her power is so wound up into physical damage that it locks her ceiling into artifact investment. Rolling for her sixth constellation is not an ask that anyone should ever be recommending, and her ability to invoke FOMO into the community is unmatched. Do not be fooled by incredibly well-invested Eulas. Her highlight reels are a result of countless artifact runs and instance resets because of her issues. Even for players that are not invested into clearing the abyss, Eula can be a nightmare in the overworld. She still needs a lot of energy to cast her burst, and even if you have enough, enemies will typically be dead because of her strong normal attacks before your burst even expires. Thanks for watching this overview of the Kitchen Main's theory crafting steps thoughts on Eula. We would highly recommend visiting the website if you need focused guidance on her theme compositions and combos. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, and we will do our best to answer.